Pete Rose wrote a letter to Rob, by the way. Did you read it? I read it.
I did. I didn't want to. You know how many times I skimmed past it, like scrolled past it on my phone to keep from reading it, and then finally, I think you sent it to me. I was like, all right, I got to read this because I
I
think we're gonna
sent it
talk
to you
about
twice.
it. You
Then
did.
I unsent it. I was like, oh, I already said that too.
And so I was like, all right, I'll skim it. I read like the first sentence of the first paragraph, first sentence of the paragraph, and then I ended up, or the second paragraph, ended up reading the third, ended up reading the fourth. I was like, well, at this point, I might as well just go back and read the whole thing. So
You tried to get out of it.
I tried so hard to get out of it.
Well, what'd you think when you read it, Brad? Tell the baseball family, summarize it for us. What did he say?
Well, he just said, I mean, basically my takeaway was, I'm sorry for what I did. I want another chance at the Hall of Fame. That's the big thing, is he wants to be in the Hall of Fame. Guys like Roger Clemens, where he's like, I don't care about that. I was out to make money, right?
Yeah.
Pete Rose wants to be in the Hall of Fame. And I think part of that for him is that adding Hall of Fame to his signature at this point in his life adds value to it. And Pete Rose is really big on that, obviously, as we know, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it. But also, I mean, he worked hard. Charlie Hustle.
For sure.
He played hard, and he, gambling aside, certainly deserves to be there because he worked hard and played hard on the field all the time to reach his achievements, to be the all-time hit king.
Yeah.
Right? So I get it. And I think gambling aside, he absolutely deserves to be there. But gambling, I maintain that gambling has been a rule in baseball since like the beginning of time.
Basically.
And he broke it. And that's been the punishment. Yeah. Because, and this is the other thing too, is that if Pete Rose gets in, Shoeless Joe Jackson deserves to be in.
Immediately.
Like yesterday, if that's the case.
Maybe if you've already decided Pete Rose gets in, Joe Jackson goes in first, and then you can put Pete Rose in the next year.
Maybe if you start considering Pete Rose, you put Joe Jackson in.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, even if it's like, let's have a meeting to see if we're going to let Pete Rose in, then the first thing you do is get Shoeless Joe in there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he absolutely deserves to be in there because he was like a peripheral. From what I understand, he was like a peripheral player in that group that basically he was thrown into the deal to finalize things so that it would go through because they wanted a big name.
They wanted a big name. Yep. It's a crime. It's a terrible shame. The Joe Jackson thing is a terrible shame. Because name one of the other eight players.
Nobody can.
Exactly.
Nobody can.
And that's why he was carved into that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Look at his performance in that World Series. Just look at it. I dare anybody to look at it and tell me he threw the game. Go ahead.
Would you look at it? Sometimes you just got to look at it.
Just look at it. You go ahead. I'll sit here. I'll wait.
So what did you think about what Pete Rose said, though, Brig?
It was pandering, and it was the closest thing to begging that I think he would allow himself to I don't want to say stoop to, because there was no sense of stooping in the letter, but I do think that it was as near to begging as his pride would allow him to go, and before he started to lose face and truly grovel. And baseball family, don't get me wrong, that's not at all how it reads. But given the context and the entirety of the situation, I think you have to just consider that when he says in the letter, I'm 81, I'm super old, I've served my time, please give me another look, just one more chance. I think it's for me, it was brimming with sorrow, and it had this melancholy plea. It was very sad. And I agree with you, Brad. I think that if you're able to separate the gambling, and we don't know how far back the gambling extended. Maybe he was doing it during his days on the field as a player, but we know it happened when he was a manager.
I'm sure he was.
I'm sure he was too, because he's an addict, right? And nothing against people who have battled addiction. I'm right there with you. But what I want to tell everybody is that, just like Brad said, my personal opinion is that that's the cardinal rule. There's one major sin in baseball. And you can sit and think that cheating is a sin in baseball, but it's not. That was proven recently, right?
Yeah, we know
how cheating is not the cardinal sin of baseball. it's gambling on the game. It's betting on the game. If
because
you do that, it's
nothing
over.
destroys, nothing will wreck the integrity of the game more than if you have money riding on it, other than money earning. But if you can fix the outcome of a game to make more money,
Yeah.
every time. I'm
Or
sorry,
yeah,
but
exactly. Right.
every single time it's going to
Yeah,
happen.
it's
And
too
him
bad.
saying that he never bet on his team, I'm sorry, but for somebody who does gamble, if I could affect the outcome of a game at all, I'd do it.
Would
I
you?
would. Oh yeah, yeah. If
Yeah.
I like, I have a hard time believing somebody with that much money riding on a game would only bet on his team, especially if he walks into the clubhouse someday and he's like, "Number 5's going today. All-star shortstop's got a banged up knee.
Yeah.
We're not winning this game. I'm not putting money on my team today." But he's an addict, so he's got to have money riding on it, or else it's empty, right?
Yeah. Right.
So
Yeah.
that's why there's like no. I'm like, there's no way he only bet on his team to win.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's really hard to swallow. But I think for me, the biggest thing comes back is the sorrow. He's clearly filled with sorrow. And how could he not be? I mean, this has just gone
Right?
on way too long. And so if there is a chance, then give him a chance. If there's not a chance, then then make it very clear right now. If I'm Rob Manfred, and if I'm the Hall of Fame committee or whomever else might have any say in this decision, I would issue an equally firm statement in response, and I would make one of the two positions very clear, especially if it's no, thank you for asking, knock it off. Don't ever. We're not
Right.
like it. It needs to have a sense of finality to it, or he's not going to be able to move on. And I think that's the I don't want to say humane, but that's the kind thing to do. Is if the answer is no, make it firm, set it in stone, and be done, so he can be done.
Yeah. And I guess my last thing with this whole thing is that you have to set a precedent, right? Like if you come back and you let Pete Rose into the Hall of Fame after that, what happens next?
Right.
Especially with gambling legalized now in the stadiums.
Yep.
Like we walk every time we go to Chase Field, we walk up to the like as we walk by the ticket office, there's a Caesars right there.
Yep.
So these guys, if they wanted to, they could just walk over to Caesars, place a bet, and then go into the clubhouse and play the game.
Or just have somebody do it for them.
Or have somebody exactly.
They have to stand there themselves.
And who
Just have
says they're
somebody
not
do it.
anyway?
You can do it on their phone.
Yeah, I know. And that's the thing, is that you have to set a precedent of somebody who's gambling on baseball cannot be rewarded with the Hall of Fame because it is like it's worse. In my opinion, it's worse than steroids.
It is, and it's easier than it's ever been.
Yeah,
And steroids, it's getting harder than it's ever been.
right.
So I think for that, just comparing those two, I agree with you. The other thing I will say though is, and this is the last thing for me on it, is I'm way behind you, all the way. I'm right there. I'm like, I got your back on this, because for what comes next in baseball, sorry, Pete. I'm sorry. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with what might happen if we let you in the Hall of Fame.
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that sucks. It sucks.